Let's go through a few more effects, and then I think you guys will be ready to start exploring everything on your own. I'm going to Control, Alt, Shift, and E again to create a duplicate of everything. And let's just play around with Find Edges. Under Filter, Stylize, Find Edges. Oh, that was less interesting than I expected in some ways and more interesting in others. I think these edges are good and these are not so great. So what can we do about that? Here, let's duplicate this. Do a Filter, Stylize, Find Edges. And this time, now we've got a duplicate. What if we multiply? Now the edges are becoming a little more apparent in some places, but it's not destroying everything we've created. What if we invert? Oh, that's even more fun. Take a look at that. I think that's more interesting altogether. So I'm going to Control Alt Shift E again to create another duplicate since I've done those destructive edits. That was a good time to save. Let's take a look at some of the other things we can do. We can, for example, oh, by the way, Find Edges looks for the contrast between the contrast between sets of pixels, clumps of pixels, and then it tries to enhance them. And then we'll turn the rest of the image a bit white, which is perfect for darkening modes. We did an invert and a multiply though. I think that works pretty well. If we go into levels, you can see that there's a lot missing now. We can brighten that up if we so choose, which is fine. Come in, start getting some crazy shapes. Speaking of crazy shapes, we can do zigzags with a pencil, right? This is an oldie goldie. Curves, pencil. Different zigzags can produce some pretty crazy effects. Perhaps some that we don't want. But don't forget that is in fact an option that you have available, which will allow you to invert in some places but not in others. I think that this has just made an absolute mess, so let's not do that this time around. You also have the ability to add a soft glow with something like Gaussian blur. This is easy enough with a smart object. We just go in with a quick filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then tell it OK. Now that we have a blur, I can come back to our blending mode options. And then in our blending mode options, I can just set it to, say, screen. And voila, we have a soft blur effect. And you can lower that if you want. But that can create some interesting effects as well. Might be fun to even zoom in on some of this, extend it out. So that could be good too. So we've got that. We also have, or some other ones that I wanted to show you. We've done Pixelate Crystallize. That's a great way to reduce content. I have not shown you the Solarize, which is an inversion of certain tonal areas. So that's good for a pin light. So if we come into Filter, Stylize, Solarize, it inverted certain things. I don't like it that much. Let's get rid of it. Let's instead do Oil Paint. Filter, Stylize. Now in some of the older versions of Photoshop, I believe they had it out here, but now it's over here. And Oil Paint attempts to turn this into an oil painting. Now we have a certain amount of stylization that we can apply. Usually higher is more fun. We have Cleanliness. That will just mean that it creates these strokes. We have the scale, and we have the bristle detail. Lower bristle detail should, depending on your scale, cause a loss or increase of detail. You also have lighting, which you can get rid of or apply, and that will create kind of a embossing effect. Gosh, that took me a minute to think of. You have shine that you can increase or decrease. I think too much shine looks pretty disgusting pretty quickly, so watch out for that. Let's tell it okay though. And you can see these crazy little effects. I've mentioned in previous classes, it reminds me a bit of Google Deep Dream. So take that with a grain of salt. Let me bring up our filter effects. We could apply something like a multiply to this, which will darken it in some areas, or a screen if we needed to lighten it up, or an overlay if we wanted to just increase the contrast. I don't like that one very much, so we could turn off the eyeball before, after. Oh, you know what? Starting to have some interesting effects. Now might be a time to revisit our filter blur gallery. Sorry, our filter blur surface blur. Here we go. Oops. Listen to that spin. Here we go. Add that on top. Hopefully that will churn it all out. There we go. That's starting to create some interesting effects. The colors are getting a little wonky, so that would need to be revisited. But I feel as though we might be on to something. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to another video, and I will show you a few more filters.